Greetings. My name is Anthony Amp Elmore. I am president and founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association. We encourage those of you who are studying the Buddhist religion to be wary and understand that Buddhism, as it is being taught by most Japanese and whites, or rather Nichiren Buddhism, as it is being taught by most Japanese and whites, is inclusive of institutional racism. Now, this is not going to be a lecture, but this is going to be a quick Buddhist history course, or a quick Buddhist lesson. Most of the time, when you read people who use the word Sanskrit, they reference it or they preference the word with sacred Sanskrit. First of all, you should ask these people, what is it about Sanskrit that makes it sacred? Now, did Nichiren Shonin ever call Sanskrit sacred? Nichiren very rarely used the word Sanskrit, and when Nichiren Shonin used the word Sanskrit, he questioned the authenticity of the Sanskrit versions of the Buddhist teachings, because Nichiren Shonin understood that when Kumarajiva translated the Lotus Sutra from the Indian Ethiopian language of Pali or Prakrit, Nichiren Shonin understood that he translated it from the African language into Chinese. When the Sanskrit versions of the Lotus Sutra came about, they came about hundreds of years later. Today, we have Japanese and white people who teach Nichiren Buddhism, and they teach you that the Gohonzon is a combination of Sanskrit and Chinese. I'm here to give you a quick history lesson that this is not true. First of all, let's look on the Gohonzon and let's look at the reference to what the races or the institutional races mean when they said there is Sanskrit on the Gohonzon. On the Gohonzon, there are two characters on the Gohonzon, and I encourage any of you who study in Buddhism, don't just listen to a Japanese and a white person who tell you about Buddhism. See, the way that they got rid of all of the black history in Buddhism is that the Hindus pulled a coup. The coup is to integrate the Sanskrit language into the Buddhism, and when they integrated the Sanskrit language, they did a cultural takeover or a cultural hijacking by extricating all of the black history in Buddhism. Now, let's look at the Gohonzon, or what we call the mandala of the Lotus Sutra, and explain and dispel the actual myth of Sanskrit being on the Gohonzon. There are two esoteric characters on the Gohonzon. To the left is called a bija. A bija means a seed. Now, to the left is the god Azen, is known in Japanese as Azen, and to the right is the god Fudu. Now, let's take this with a bit of history. We can give you archaeological, literary, and scientific evidence that this is not a Sanskrit character. See, these characters were written by Nichiren Shonin in the language or in the character of bija. Now, in the first language that was translated of the Buddhist writings were the Pali Canon in Theravada Buddhism. The Pali Canon, there was a sutra called the Bija Sutta. It was called a Bija Sutta because they don't use the word sutra. Sutra is Sanskrit, but it's called the Bija Sutta. In the Bija Sutra, you see the seed, and it talks about it, and common sense and logic would tell you that when this sutra was translated from the Ethiopian Indian language of Pali or Prakrit, it was translated into Chinese, and Nichiren read the Bija Sutra. Now, this is the god Ezen. The god Ezen is referred to as Dainichi. Now, if you look at the ancient capital of Nara, the great bronze and gold Buddha statue is that of a black man, and this is Dainichi. Dainichi and Ezen is one and the same god. Now, we come to the right, and we see the god Fudu. Fudu is known in the Pali Sutra as Akala. There's a sutra called the Akala Sutra. In the African language of Pali or Prakrit, it means immovable. Fudo or Fudomoto means immovable. So, as you see, these were around during the ancient times. It comes from the esoteric teachings, and this is not Sanskrit, but the races and the institutional races want to make you believe that this is Sanskrit, but we bring to you archaeological evidence because in the Pali Sutra and the Bija Sutra rather, and the Akala Sutra, this is in the Pali Canon. I also want to close by showing you pictures of the Lotus Sutra. See, the Lotus Sutra was written from the African Ethiopian language of Pali or Prakrit, and it was translated into Chinese. This is archaeological evidence that Sanskrit versions of the Lotus Sutra did not come back until hundreds of years later, and Nichiren even mentioned this in the Gold Show. But there's another way, ladies and gentlemen, that we can tell that there was a black Buddhist history. When the Lotus Sutra was translated into Chinese, but it also was translated by pictures. I want you to see here an early picture of the Lotus Sutra that was in a cave in China. In this picture in a cave in China, all you see is black people, because the Lotus Sutra and Buddhism was a religion of black people. Look at this picture in the cave in China. Now, as you know, that Buddhism went from China to Korea. It was called Korea, and I want you to see a picture of the Lotus Sutra right here in the Chinese characters, and you can see the pictures. Everyone on the Lotus Sutra are black people. Now you got it? You got your black Buddhist history lesson. So when the whites tell you that Sanskrit is a sacred language, just ask them, did Nichiren say it's sacred? No, they say it's sacred because they use their racism of Sanskrit to extricate all black people out of Buddhism. But the Buddha taught a religion that was racially linguistic equality of all people. I am Anthony Amp Elmore, President and founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association with a Black History Buddhist tip.
Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. Tell me what the line I see, disregard what the facts may be. All ancient icons show a simple fact. They all show that the Buddha was black. I believe in facts indicator was wrong. Buddha was no Aryan. This song saw the history by those who rewrite history.